Good morning. My name is Melissa, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the APM Community Webcast EPAgent call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. I would now like to turn the call over to Guenter Grossberger.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the webcast. So we're kicking off a new series of community webcasts focused on some general topics and some more technical or developer topics. And today the topic is the EPAgent. So my name is Guenter Grossberger. I'm part of the CA APM SWAT team. So I'm working together with customers to make sure that they get the most value out of the product to, for example, custom configurations, custom extensions, field packs, and I'm quite active also in the community. And also with teaching pre-conference training and other sessions at CA, where also I might have run into some of you 1.5 weeks ago in Las Vegas. So this will be a rather short webcast. We won't keep you too long. I'm starting with a brief overview of EPAgent. It's been around for some time, and recently was on the chat, or as the operator said, you could press star 1 on your keypad. So the Environment Performance Agent, that's the long name, or short EPA, is a generic agent to monitor everything that's not Java and .NET and recently PHP and Node. So it's deployed as a Java process, and it can have plugins, and that plugins can be basically any applications or any scripts in any language that's supported on the platform you're running it on. This could be Go, this could be Python, this could be Java, this could be a command line tool, whatever you want. And you can get information from basically everywhere. You can get information from the local operating system. It's often used to enrich the information you get in CA APM with more detailed operating system metrics like I/O or network or CPU or data button processes. You can also grab information from log files. You can call any API locally or remotely and get that information into APM. So it's basically a very generic solution, and internally it's got the agent interface and sends the metrics, and also there is the possibility to send traces over to Infoscope Enterprise Manager and display it in the UI. EPA plugins can be of 2 types. There are stateful plugins that are running indefinitely, so EPA starts them once and just monitors that they're still connected. And stateless EPA plugins, they will be restarted over and over. So for example, if you have a short operating system call and you want to run this command every 15 seconds, you would configure a stateless plugin with a frequency of 15 seconds. Communication between the plugins and the EPAgent takes place over standard out. So EPA expects the plugins to write their metrics to standard out, it reads them in, and if they're in the right format, which we'll cover on next, or one of the next slides, it will create a metric and send it over to the Enterprise Manager. As I said, the target system where you get the data from can be local, can be remote, and a lot of the APM extensions that have been around are based on this ETA mechanism, and they're basically ETA plugins. So, for example, the MQ extension, the web server extension, the Oracle database extension, some of the server extensions like the TIBCO plugin and the Web Methods Broker, they are all based on EPA. Like the Java agent, the EPAgent has a property file, which by default is interscope EPAgent.properties. It contains the usual settings like log settings, where I would recommend to replace console with log files, and the connection to the Enterprise Manager, and you have 2 ports that you can configure. The one is the old network data port, which expects the same input format as from standard out. And the other one is the HTTP server port, and that's the one, if you want to use the RESTful API, you want to use that port. By default, after installation, both ports are commented out, so ETA is configured to just read from standard in, and you would have to uncomment it in the properties file to open the ports. And of course, if you have firewall, either locally, software, or some rules in the network, you would have to open that port, but you can set it to any port you like. So the plugins are configured very simply. There's a property plugin stateful.names, and you just give a name there. For example, here we have 5 stateful plugins configured, and for every plugin, you supply the command that has to be executed by the EPA for this plugin. So, for example, for the Apache log reader, we have user bin Perl, so it's a Perl script, and then we have the path to the Perl file. For a Java extension, the property is a little bit different, so you have the same interscope EPAgent stateful dot and the name of the plugin, and then dot class, and then you have the class and the parameters, for example, 1, 2, in this example. And just make sure that the class path to this jar or this class file and everything else you need is in the class path of the EPAgent when you start it. So you might have to add it to the startup script. For a stateless plugin, it's basically the same. You have a property where you enumerate all the plugins, and for every plugin you supply commands. And in addition, because they're stateless and they have a frequency, you supply a second parameter, delay in seconds. So this plugin will be executed every 900 seconds, so every 15 minutes. Rather simple. There's not much rocket science to EPAgent. Communication of metrics. I will not be covering the traces in this session. Communication of the metrics takes part over 2 formats. The one is the simple format, where you just have the metric name, for example, and here we have resource usage, pipe IO, colon, disk life equals 37. So we have the metric path, resource usage, pipe IO. So we have the folder resource usage, and the metric name is described, and the value is 37. So you can see you can supply a data type here. It defaults to counter, and if the value is not a number, it defaults to a string event. So the second message, we have Apache errors, and we have the last error string, metric name, and the error message. The same in the XML format. Has the advantage that you can supply a type, so you can say the 37 is a long counter in contrast to a integer counter or to an int average, and I will give you some links at the end of the presentation, and I'll also post them as a comment to the invite to the event where you can find more information. There are about 8 metric data types, and the big difference is how they are aggregated. So counters, you will always get the max value, and for averages, they are averaged. If you have more than one value in one interval, or if you have a longer time frame and they are aggregated, for counters we will the max, and for average the sum, and then we have the per interval counter, which will give you the sum of the values per interval. But I also wrote a blog on the community about all the metric data types. So if you want to have a specific data type, or if you want to have a specific aggregation, use the XML format. In Interscope 9.7.1, so in Service Pack 1 of 9.7, we introduced the RESTful EPA interface. That means you need to run EPAgent of at least version 9.7.1. There's a URL, so you have the EPA host, and you have the HTTP port that we mentioned before, and /APM/metric feed. You have to post your values there. You have to supply the header content type as application JSON, and then you supply just a JSON string with a metrics array, and every array member also contains the type, the name, and the value. And you get a HTTP response code 200 OK if everything was received correctly, and you get a JSON reply with the valid metric count and with error messages and error codes in JSON format. And there's an article on the developer community site that gives you more information about the RESTful EPA interface. So with this RESTful EPA interface, it gives you the possibility to run your script remotely from the EPAgent. So you don't need to install or run the EPAgent, the Java process on every system that you want to monitor, but you can run it remotely and send the metrics from your script to an EPAgent on another box. Here is an example. So very, very simple structure. You have the types, so we have integer counters, long counters, integer averages, and if you supply more than one value per interval, per 15-second interval, like here we have 3 int averages, they are aggregated, and we will see in the demo what APM does with it. The links I promised you and that I will post after the session, everything about EPA is documented on the APM wiki, so and on our public documentation. There are some articles in the APM community, so an EPA agent overview in the wiki that Hiko Davis created. The EPAgent 101 talks about the RESTful APA interface, and there are probably the biggest number of feedbacks on the community are EPAgents. and Tico Davis, Chris Klein, and a lot of other guys have created a lot of them, and they are available for you to download. We also have a number on our GitHub site, so you could also have a look there. Just search for EPAgent and download the code, or we would also like to invite you to upload your script either to the community or to GitHub and share with all your fellow APM users. So this was the boring part, and now let's go to the demo. First thing, a simple thing is I've got an EPAgent running on a remote system, and here I'm using the curl command with the header application JSON. I'm supplying a data file, and I'm sending this to my EPAgent running on a remote system. And before I do that, I will just show you this example. So it's exactly the same that you have seen in the presentation. So we have an integer counter, long counter, some averages, and so on. So I'm sending this, and we see here the response is I got a valid count. I sent 10 valid metrics to the EPAgent. And now if I change something, so I could have a title in the metric type, I could supply an invalid metric name without a column. And if I'm sending that, I get an error message here. So one or more metric specifications were not valid. I've got an error code 1010. This is 1010. This is documented in the documentation. I've got 2 invalid metrics. I've still got 8 valid metrics. And for every metric, I get an entry in the metric errors array, which gives me the metric name, the metric error code, and an error message. So here I have an invalid metric type, and here I have an invalid metric name. So basically exactly what we expected. How does this look in the web view? So I created the metrics on the sample data. Here I have my integer values, I have my long values, and my string values. And here I got my 2 integer values. If I go here, I can see that in this interval I had 3 values with a minimum value of 3, a maximum value of 8, and the third value, if you remember, was 4, which gives us a total of 15 divided by 3 gives us an average value of 5. So exactly what we would expect. For the integer counter, we get a flat value, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And you also notice if you use a counter, the value stays at the same value even if no new value is supplied. For the average, if no new value is supplied, it drops back to 0. And for the string event, we just get the string, and as you might all know, string events are not stored, there's only a live value. So if I go to the historic view, there's no data for a string value, but there's still the data for all the integer and long values. So this was a simple example, and a more elaborate example, I got the Linux status example that I downloaded from GitHub. I will show you this in a minute. So it's just a script that grabs some values from my Linux system, and I'm connecting to port 80808080. To this port, and if I run the script, I see that I have submitted metrics for the first time. And if I go back to the web view, I see my Linux stats coming in. So I've got values here, and those are coming from the script from my APM Docker registry server. So I got some memory metrics here. Takes a moment to refresh in the view. And I got my CPU. CPU is not very busy. I've got a value of 1 here. And with all the values you get, you can build your own type viewers. We also have a lot of information, so you can have this views showing you, for example, all the CPU metrics stacked up. So you would need to build a XML type view for that. So I just wanted to show you, if you go to github.com/CAAPM and search for EPA, there are a lot of EPA agents here. There's a agent for Cloud Foundry Firehose from Tim McGee. There's a Windows WMI plugin from Triton. There is a Docker field patch. And here are the APM field patch examples. This is the project that I cloned to my machine, and I'm executing this script. So if you want to do the same, you can have a look here. If you want to enrich the script, I just took that as a template for my Python script, for example. It's very simple. It collects the CPU info by calling or by reading from the file system, and it creates the metrics and sends them out. So if you want to do more with the RESTful EPA, use this one or use my Docker example as a template and so from there. So with that, I've concluded my presentation. You can also find more information on the community. So here's the link under Get Started, EPAgent 101, use the SDK to send data. And there are more links up here, or you just go to wiki.ca.com/APM. And just open implementing agent, EPAgent, and you get all the information there. So this concludes my short presentation. If you have questions, Melissa, could you please see again? I have no questions on the chat.
And to ask an audio question, please press *1. Again, to ask an audio question, please press *1.
Okay, Guenter, it looks like we don't have any questions from the audience, so thank you very much for your presentation today. As Guenter mentioned, this will get posted to the community. If not today, then definitely by tomorrow. And thank you for joining. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you for joining today's conference call. You may now disconnect your lines.